That works, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
How
We're
are you guys?
testing our. Good. How are you?
Good.
Can you guys see that when I share it?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Good job testing it.
I just get so nervous. I'm like, is this thing gonna
I
work?
know. It's gonna break.
The last time we did, the person who was sharing, we had like technical difficulties for like 5 to 10 minutes. We were like,
It's a hard time to buffer.
no, it wasn't great.
Hey, Naria.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Wait, I don't have my. I'll pop in quickly. Hi.
I never turn my camera on when I'm talking to you. So hey.
I popped in quickly before everybody else joined. Mr. Ross, I can't wait to hear you.
I know. I can't wait to see you again tonight at our in-person event.
I know, having a party today.
I know. So much Workfront today.
Then I'll mute you guys.
Hey, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Monique.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we at least have the slides up, but I'm going to wait probably another minute-ish just because I know there was a few others that are probably just coming from other meetings and things like that. And I see we already started the recording, so we're good there. There we go. All right, let's try now. There we go. But I'm super excited to do this joint WUG between the DC, Boston, and all things East Coast. Yeah, you see that number steady climbing. So I'll give it another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll get started. All right. Well, without any further ado, let's get this thing started because I know that we have two really great champions that are going to be sharing their knowledge with us. I'm excited to learn. The reason why we kind of brought our forces together is because of both the DMV, which is not the Department of Motor Vehicles, the DC, Maryland, Virginia WUG, and the Boston WUG, both kind of shared independently that resource management and just setting up your project for better assignments and tracking and all of that stuff was something that we were very interested in. So we tapped into our network of champions and was able to find not one, but two people that can share their expertise. But before we get into all of that, just a quick reminder this is being recorded. You guys aren't new to this, or maybe you are. So if you don't want to be seen for any purposes, you can always drop off and then watch the recording on YouTube when it's posted. But like I said, we have Victoria and Ross that will be speaking to both of us. I'm not going to dwell on this slide only because both of them are going to introduce themselves individually. But very excited. And as I said, we're going to be covering, templates, allocating resources, the workload balancer, and a bunch more. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, turn things over to Victoria.
Perfect. Thank you, Monique.
Of course.
All right. Let me know if you can't see my screen.
We can see it. You're good.
Perfect. All right. Well, I'm excited to be here with you all today. And as a quick highlight reel about myself before I fully dive in, my name is Victoria Sellers. I'm right in between DC and Boston in the Philadelphia suburbs, where I live with my husband and my two dogs. As Monique said, I'm a Workfront Champion alongside herself and Ross. And I work at Accenture focusing on Workfront implementations as well as optimizations. So excited to be here with you all and to talk about resource management. So for today's session, I really want to focus in on how to set up project templates for resource management. So in order to use the full capabilities of tools like Workload Balancer or Planner, your project templates and thus your projects need to be set up for success. So in order to do this, you need things like durations and planned hours assigned to tasks so that when you're using capacity management tools, the correct allocations are being set for your users. And before I go into the technical details, do want to mention I have my partner in crime on the solution that we're demoing today, Brendan Humphreys, who's from the DC area as well, on the call. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. So to set the stage on what we did, before we go into how we used a fusion scenario for this t-shirt sizing process, really want to set the stage of what the out-of-the-box options are. So you might be familiar, you might not, but a lot of times we have templates for creating assets like emails, landing pages, or banners. And in order to make sure the allocations are correct, we need to create, let's say, 7 variations of these. So it could be anywhere from extra small to extra, extra large. And those are all denoting how long or how complex building that email might be. So we might have an email with fresh content. It's going to take us 2 months. Or we might have more of a plug and play email. It takes a day. It's in and out the door. So we want to be able to account for all of those different variables in how long it's going to take to create that type of asset. But the problem with this approach is that, all right, on the screen, I might be only showing 1 email, and that might be only 7 templates. But as you start to scale across all the different assets that you might create, those 7 templates might turn into 70 or 140 templates. And then the onus on updating all of those is really going to be on your group admins or even your system admins. And so updating 140 templates, making sure they're all in lockstep with each other really becomes a challenge. So what we did differently on one of our client projects was say, all right, we're going to flip the script here and really focus in on having one email template. And we're going to use Fusion to size it appropriately to account for that complexity. And some of the principles that we used for this approach were that we wanted to make sure these templates were going to be maintainable by users who weren't, let's say, familiar with Fusion or might not have wanted to go into Fusion to make any of those changes. We wanted to keep everything on the Workfront end. So no hard coding in Fusion, everything's dynamic. Wanted to have fewer templates, and we also wanted it to be easy to make inline edits. So just to give you a quick recap too, just in case you're a little bit newer to Workfront, want to distinguish what a template is from a project before we dive into what our solution looked like. So a template is going to be a reusable project blueprint. So it's really that base layer that says, here's all the tasks I need to complete ever to create an email. And then a project's going to be where that work actually gets done. So you can use the template to create the project. All right, now's where things get fun. So this is what our solution looks like from the perspective of the group admins. And then I'll dive into all the different setup components so that you could do this yourselves. So we have that core email template that I talked about. All right, we have one template to maintain for emails. And then you can see over here that we have a view in place so that admins can come into this template and say, all right, duration for an extra small is 1 hour, 1 day. Or if we look down here, an extra large is 5 hours, 5 days. So what we did with this solution was really create a table view where admins can come in and inline edit all of this information in the exact same place that they're maintaining the template itself. So if I ever wanted to come in and add new tasks, I can add the task and add the sizing information in the same location. And I think this is really cool because a lot of solutions you might have seen in the past were when you have Fusion doing that dynamic t-shirt sizing, the information or the data table might have been in a Fusion data store, or it could have been in a container or an admin project that's located separately in the system. So there's different ways to maintain that table, but what I like about this is that it's in the exact same place. So it really plays into that whole theme. We want this to be as easy as possible for admins to maintain. It also plays into, because it's so easy for admins to maintain, we really don't need to have any dev resources dedicated to the updates here. A lot of times what we might have done in the past is have it in a Fusion data store. And then the process is you have to submit a request. You have to write the requirements. You have to talk about it in a sprint planning meeting. You have to get it added to a sprint. And at that point, it could have taken a couple of weeks just to make a change to a number field. This is a few seconds. So it's also going to reduce, like, I don't want to call it the time to market, but the time to making those updates and showing changes live in the system. All right, so that's what we did, but want to show you now how we did it. So we, on the back end, had a task automation custom form that was attached to all of the templates in all of the template tasks in a template. So you can see here, we have a few sections for the task sizing. It's that same information that you would have seen on this screen, but this is where it's being stored on the back end in the system, is on a custom form that's attached. And the nice part about the system out of the box is that you don't necessarily need to go through and attach that custom form to all the different tasks. By applying this view and having this table set up this way, as long as the form is shared with admins and group admins, they can come into this table, start inputting the data, and as they input the data, this template task custom form is going to attach automatically. I should note too, we only shared this form so that it was viewable by admins so that the rest of the users in the system didn't see it when the real projects were created from template. All right, so that's also how we created the view And we just have admins come in, turn the view on when they're making any changes here so that they can enter their information in line. All right, so kind of want to go through the experience of what this looks like and also get a little bit more in depth with what the Fusion modules look like as well. So the process here is that I'm a requester. I come into the system. I'm looking for an email. It's part of a sales campaign. I fill out all of my details and I say, okay, this is going to be a medium-sized project. There's also other entry points that you could do here. Maybe the requester doesn't know what the size is, or you want somebody on a trafficking team or the design lead to say how large this effort is going to be. So it doesn't have to be filled out by the requester, but at some point, entering it on an intake level for a request or a project is going to be key here. So then when that form is submitted, we have a calculation that is part of the custom form that we attached that says, all right, we want to say this was a medium size that was selected at intake. And so if a medium was selected, pull the value from the medium field. And then this is going to be the final value that Fusion is going to input into the native duration and planned hours fields. The reason for this calculation too is, again, we're trying to make sure everything is maintainable on the Workfront end instead of the Fusion end. So if there are ever changes to these fields, or maybe we change the process of the field name or where it's entered, we can reconfigure that easily on the Workfront end without any tech debt. Okay, so to talk about what the Fusion modules looked like here. So this is something that could be mapped into any of your existing scenarios, but just to show the couple of modules that relate to getting this process in place. So this is part of a larger request to project conversion scenario. And you'll see here, we have a module that's going to search for tasks with the task automation custom form. And you'll see that if a task is found with that custom form, it's going to pop over through this router to update the duration and planned hours. So the nice part about this Fusion scenario is that it's also only a couple of modules. And as you see over here on the right, this module expanded is going to take the ID of the task in question, and then we're going to plug in that task duration and task plan hours that were the outcomes of these calculated fields into that task's native duration and native work fields. As a note, work is planned hours, has a different name in Fusion for this process. So then the final result is we submitted the intake, we said it was a medium, we figured out what medium should be in terms of size and planned hours, Fusion scenario ran, and now we have a t-shirt sized project with all the days mapped accordingly. And as a quick note, if you try this yourselves, one thing you have to be aware of is that for this process to work, you do need 1 day, 1 hour mapped into the duration and planned hours fields. Just like a quirk of Workfront, this process won't work unless 1 is set in all of these columns. Okay, so when I was talking to your WUG leaders about this presentation, we also talked about how there were a lot of spin-off templates that could be created when certain tasks might not be applicable to the workflow. And then you might not just have all the different sized templates, but you might have an email template, agency used, email template, agency not used. There's a lot of different iterations that could come from what's needed for a given project, because as we probably all know, every project feels unique. So also wanted to show how we had a dynamic task deletion as part of this process. So this plays into, again, the same core concepts. We want to keep it as one master template that has if-then logic to customize it to the specific asset's needs. So we'll go through the details of this process, but it's really just saying, okay, if a certain value is selected on the intake form, then that task should be deleted from the project that's created from the template. So to see this in action, we have our intake form here. It's again for creating an email. And you can see down here, there's a question managed by agency. And so if managed by agency is selected as no when it's submitted, then that task is going to be deleted. And how we set that logic up, again, in a very flexible, modular, dynamic manner, is that on the template, we set a deletion field and a deletion value. So this says, logic-wise, that if managed by agency is selected as no, because on the intake form, we had managed by agency as the question and no as a possible answer. If that's selected at intake, then this task should automatically delete from the project. What's cool about this is that, again, we're not using data stores, we're not using other tables, and it really allows us to scale this template, but not create different iterations. We can do other things like if legal review isn't required, then we're going to delete out that task. Or if A/B testing isn't required, then we delete out this task. But if that field was selected as yes, then these two tasks stay when the project is created. Another thing to note here too, for demo purposes, I have this as a single select option, but you can also utilize this process with calculated fields to make it like multi-conditional or add different options. Maybe you have two questions that need to be answered in order for a task to be deleted. So you can create calc fields in order to do this as well. And you can also do it with sections. So if I wanted to, maybe I had like a create section or a deliver section, I could apply this same deletion logic to the parent tasks, and then that whole section will be wiped. The only thing to really note here is that if you start utilizing this type of deletion process, make sure to account for the predecessors if that task were to be deleted. So if you add maybe double predecessors here and this task is deleted, then that predecessor is also going to be deleted, but there's no need to refinesse or rejig the tool to make sure that the predecessors map correctly. You accounted for it in the template. And we also have a fun view here so that admins can maintain it themselves. All right, and then result is that we no longer have that agency task. We have a created project and we can start our work. But before we wrap up, I want to show you what the Fusion modules look like for this. This one's a tiny bit more complex than the one is for t-shirt sizing, but you can see here, this is different route on that same type of scenario that's creating, or rather turning a request into a project. So it's searching for that task custom form because that's where we're storing that deletion value. And then that task deletion has a formula in here that determines whether or not it should be deleted. And then we just have another module that does the actual deletion. All right. So that is my presentation.
Victoria, thank you so much for sharing how you've set that all up. It's phenomenal to see. I know we had a few questions come into the chat, but it seems most have been answered. We did have one come in from the form, and maybe you have from the intake form when people were registering. And I'll be interested in getting both your take and Ross's take on maybe how you would manage this. But someone asked, do you have a best practice on changing the default setting to help distribute evenly planned hours by day and people assigned? And is it possible for you to adjust your working week view? So pulling out your Saturdays and Sundays.
So I think to pull out Saturdays and Sundays, you just need to attach a schedule to the project template. And on the back end of the system, you need to make sure you adjust your schedule to have exceptions for holidays or weekends, or maybe like an 8-hour workday. So attaching a schedule is going to pull out weekends and holidays. I will admit, for the most part, I've heard this term before and I like to use it. I mostly go the route of peanut butter spreading the durations for a given task. So just saying if it's a 10-day task and it's 20 hours, distribute evenly over those 10 days. I don't usually get too crazy with doing some of those like calculated formulas, but maybe Ross, you do.
We have it peanut butter spread the hours out as well, but then as you'll see when I get to talking into what our process looks like, we actually meet as a project management team and balance out the hours based on a lot of different variables that go into it. So we might, and we only look at a week view, so we might move hours from one week to another to prioritize different projects on people's plates and things.
Awesome. Thank you. Hopefully that answered that question for that person. And I know we'll have some time at the end. So Ross, want to jump in as we go from the setup that Victoria has into your use case and how you've helped to create some new workflows where you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Ross.
Thanks for having me. And Victoria, that was a great presentation. There's several templates. Now I want to go back and recreate now that I know how to delete certain tasks that might not be applicable to certain sizes of things. So I love how this community, we all inspire each other. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ross Barton. I'm an Associate Vice President of Project Management at Ology here in Columbus, Ohio. I'm a Workfront Champion. I co-lead the Ohio Workfront User Group and serve as our Workfront and Fusion System Administrator. Outside of work, I love the outdoors. I've just gotten into working out lately, and I love hanging out with my family. When the DMV and Boston WUG leaders reached out about this presentation, they specifically asked for the real world view, not necessarily the idealistic Adobe view. So that's exactly what you're going to get today. I'm going to show you what actually works for us, what doesn't work, the workarounds we've built, and the honest truth about implementing resource management in a chaotic agency environment. My goal is to leave you with some practical ideas you can implement, not just theoretical best practices. So let me give you some context about Ology so you understand our use case. We're a 100-person creative agency across multiple disciplines: strategy and research, creative, photo and video, and digital and media. We like to say that we're the agency for brands on a mission. We work primarily in higher education, healthcare, and philanthropy, doing everything from brand development to full campaigns to complex digital experiences. So this is the thing to understand. We're primarily a project-based agency, so we can't plan like an internal marketing team with annual strategic plans and predictable workload. We do have some retainer clients, but most of our work comes through new business and project extensions. So this means our resource management approach has to accommodate constant change. So new projects coming in, shifting priorities, client delays, all of it. If you're in an internal marketing organization trying to apply this agency thinking or vice versa, keep that in mind. The approaches are a little different as the contexts are different. So how did we get to where we are today? I always like to look back and reflect and see how far we've come. So before 2021, we used Smartsheet. It basically gave us a 2-week view of project hours by person. And honestly, it seemed to work pretty well for them for many years. But as we grew, the limitations became clear. We couldn't see far enough ahead because different project managers were managing different projects. We had no visibility into each other's work. PTO wasn't integrated, travel wasn't tracked. You can see here in this photo, our monthly workaround. We would print 3-month calendars for everybody, pin them to a wall. All the PMs would gather and write their milestones on these calendars. We'd overlay PTO and travel. Then we'd have a big meeting to identify the bottlenecks and overloaded people. It was not very fun. The thing to remember here is by the time we finished updating it, it was already out of date. We saw a Workfront demo in 2020 and saw the resource management capabilities, and we got excited. We said that this could solve our problems. So here's the thing I want to share up front because it frames everything else. When we implemented Workfront 5 years ago, I honestly thought that resource management would become automatic. We'd set it up right. The system would just kind of like handle it. It would eliminate lots of meetings and give us all the answers. That reality never happened. And honestly, that's a good thing. What we learned is this: Workfront gives us the visibility to have the right conversations. So without it, we're flying blind. We're printing calendars, hoping we've caught conflicts, finding out too late when someone was overloaded. Now we can see 2 weeks out, 4 weeks out, much further out. We can see who's at 45 hours, who's at 25 hours. We can identify conflicts before they become fires. But the key is this: we provide context the data can't capture. So the tool shows us someone's at 45 hours. We know whether that's sustainable for them this week or whether they've already hit their limit. We know which deadlines are flexible and which are locked to a client board meeting. We know who's great at context switching and who needs focus time. We know our people before the data shows it. When someone's feeling overwhelmed, we usually know it from conversations and check-ins before their utilization numbers could reveal anything. So resource management for us requires both a system and a process. Workfront's that system. It gives us real-time data and visibility. The process is our weekly rhythm. So the meetings, the conversations, the collaborative decision-making. Workfront makes the rhythm possible, and the rhythm makes Workfront valuable. You can't have one without the other. Everything I'm going to show you today is about how we built that rhythm around Workfront capabilities. So now let me walk you through our actual weekly rhythm, because this is where the real work happens. I'll walk you through day by day, and we'll look at the tools here in a second. So starting on Wednesday afternoons, we have what we call a pre-sourcing meeting. That's where all the project managers come together. Everyone's responsible for validating hours and the timelines on their projects before the meeting. We want to make sure that the planned hours are as accurate as they can be for the following at least 2 to 4 weeks. I'll be honest, sometimes we're in the middle of a crazy week and we have to cancel this meeting. When that happens, we just show up Thursday hoping for the best. That's the reality. But what we can do is prep, and that makes a huge difference. So on Wednesdays, that Wednesday meeting, we're looking at like a 4-week view in Workload Balancer. We don't traffic to the day view. We only look at the weekly view. We'll go team by team looking for people who are significantly over their available capacity. We're looking for projects that might have some competing deliverable dates. The goal is proactive conflict resolution before the week starts, the next week starts. We're trying to catch problems before they become fires. And then on Thursday, this is where it gets really tactical. We have 3 separate meetings. Different teams have different needs. So first we'll meet with our video team, and then digital and media, and then the creative studios. So that's all of our writers and designers. We literally go person by person, project by project. We're looking at each person's workload and saying, this person has 45 hours scheduled, they're available for 40. Where can we shift those 5 hours? Any adjustments from these meetings will make them right in Workfront. And by the end of Thursday, everybody's workload should be balanced, or at least we'll have a plan. And then Friday is our reporting day. I'll export snapshots from the resource planner of the planned hours for the following week. This kind of creates a point in time record. Why do we do that? Because our weekly rebalancing tends to change historical planned hours in Workfront. A snapshot gives us the solid data we need to compare against. I'll also prepare resource forecast reports, which include a 4-week outlook and a 4-month outlook. And then Mondays are really when all of the studio stand-ups happen, where teams review their hot sheet dashboards together. And then the following Wednesday, we kind of start over. I'll do a traffic snapshot, and we look back at the past 4 weeks and compare what actually happened to what we planned. And I see a question. Yes, we do have screenshots coming up for all of that stuff, and I'll walk through that. So capacity, we'll talk about how much work time and capacity settings for a second. This comes up in every conversation about resource management. Looking at this table, this is how we've configured capacity and Workfront for our full-time employees. The default is 38 hours. That's most of the team. So the designers, writers, strategists, digital specialists. We target 38 billable hours a week out of a 40-hour work week. That gives them 2 hours for internal meetings, professional development, administrative work. Then we have our people leaders. So our studio leads and departmental managers, they're at 35. They have more meetings, more people management responsibilities, more internal work. So we've reduced their billable target. And then our leadership team's at 32. These are primarily departmental and functional leads. They're helping running the business strategically. They're involved in client work. So they need some more capacity carved out for all of that. And then our executives, that includes our CEO, they're at 20 to 24 hours. So at Ology, everyone from the top down is involved in client work. Of course, they have significant time dedicated to vision and external relationships and running the business. So their capacity is the lowest. The way Workfront handles this, everyone has an FTE of 1 because they're all full-time employees. we use that work time percentage to adjust their available capacity. So you can see there that 0.95 of 40 hours is 38 hours. It's really important to get it right in your setup. It affects everything else downstream. So getting into the tools we actually use, first is the Workload Balancer. It's our workhorse. Every project manager uses it. We look at it at the project level when planning individual projects, and then we look at it at the global level in all of these traffic meetings that I talked about for Wednesdays and Thursdays. Our filters are absolutely critical. On the right-hand side, you can see the filters panel. We do organize most of our filters by team, writer and designer collectives, video, digital media, strategy, and research. This structure aligns to actually how we review traffic on Thursdays, and we go team by team. And then some of the settings that make a big difference for us. So on the right-hand side here, hopefully you can see the screenshot, is the settings panel. So the first is the group by project. This paired with the sorting options down here at the bottom, where you can alphabetically sort by project name, allows us to make sure all client projects are together. We purposely turn off show completed work to focus on the active work, tasks that have not been completed. And then sometimes we turn on show remaining time, so we don't have to do the mental math of how many hours somebody might be over their available hours, against their planned. So turning this on shows you exactly that someone is an hour under or 7 hours over. And there's that example there on the right-hand side. So unassigned work. At the top here in the unassigned work section, this shows us what's been planned that hasn't been assigned to a specific person yet. It's sitting in the system, but nobody owns it yet. In our Wednesday meeting, we go through this systematically. We use role-based filters for this one. So we'll filter just to show, say, the video animator, and we'll review all the unassigned video work and make assignments. And we switch to the other roles and do the same thing. This just prevents the work from falling from the cracks. If it's in the unassigned work going into Thursday, there's a problem because we can't balance people's workloads if we don't know who's doing the work. The goal is by the end of the day, Wednesday, unassigned work should be as close to empty as possible. Sometimes there are tasks we're intentionally leaving unassigned. Maybe we're bringing in a freelancer. Maybe it's a placeholder, but at least we know about it and we'll come up with a plan. Once that work gets assigned, it obviously shows up in the lower section under the person's name, and that's what we're reviewing in our Thursday meetings. So the planner is really an export tool for us. What you're seeing here is this planner view. We have several filters set up that allow us to export data by role and by team and by different time ranges. We use Excel to manipulate that data in ways that Planner cannot currently. So we create custom views, we build forecasts and compare different time periods. So again, on that Fridays, we'll export after our Thursday traffic meetings. When everything is complete and stable, we'll capture a snapshot of the planned hours for the following week. And we'll also export 4-week and 4-month forecast at this time. And these regular exports give us the historical data we need, since the Workfront's native planned hours can get overwritten historically every time we rebalance sometimes. So this is what we build from those Friday reports. This is what we call our capacity forecast report. We create this every Friday and share it with leadership. So the top section shows us by month, so 3 to 4 months out. And this is by role and by team, if you will. So we're showing the available hours, the planned hours, and then that variance, which is just the available minus the planned, and then the variance percentages. So the variance is the percentage of available. So when a designer shows 92% variance in September, that means we're at 92% of available capacity. So we still have some room there. The bottom section gives us that 4-week view. It's the same metrics, just week by week, for a more tactical picture of what's coming up. The further we look out, the less confident we are in the numbers. That's just the nature of being a project-based agency. Clients delay, projects shift, new projects get layered in as work is sold, but leadership needs that longer view for pipeline planning and business development. Another one we just started doing last year is what we call a variance report. So we look backwards to learn. This is built from our Wednesday exports, comparing planned hours from last Friday to actual hours logged. The orange highlighting shows the variance where actual differed from planned by a meaningful amount. So this helps us spot those patterns. So are we constantly under planning certain types of work? Which projects regularly are running over estimate? Or, are the team members whose work is harder to predict? We're not chasing perfection here. So a project showing 35 planned and 37 actual, that's fine. That's normal variance. But when somebody shows 34 planned and they logged 44, we really want to understand what that story is. So did the client add scope? Did we underestimate? Where's the rework? Did something unexpected come up? Sometimes the answer is pretty simple, like the client was delayed, so the work shifted to the next week. That's agency life. There's nothing to fix. But consistent patterns teach us. So maybe we're systematically underestimating video editing time. Maybe certain types of client review cycles always take longer than we planned for. So this is one way that we achieve our goal of continuous improvement in how we estimate and plan our work. So I like to say this is really important. The tool gives us the data, but we provide the context that matters. So when we see someone is a couple hours over capacity in the workload balancer, what does that actually mean? So it depends. It can depend on the person. Some people can handle 43 hours in a week, where others really can't go over that 38 threshold. It depends on the week. So are they coming back from PTO and they're super refreshed? Or are they about to go on PTO and they need to cram a whole bunch of stuff in really quick? Do they have travel? Are they stressed out about something outside of work? It also depends on the project. So 43 hours of similar task is very different from 43 hours of constant context switching, right? And it also depends on the deadline. So if it's all flexible internal deadlines, that's different than hard client commitments. We feel like we know our people. We know when someone's feeling overwhelmed way before their timesheet data would show it, or at least we strive to. And we know which client relationships can handle that. Hey, can we push this 2 days conversation? This is what I mean when I say project management is a people skill. Workfront brings the data to light, and we turn that data into information with context. Oops. So one of the things that's helped us maintain good data governance is automation. Our timesheet compliance is really solid thanks to a 3-stage fusion workflow. Monday at noon, if your timesheet isn't submitted, you get a friendly little reminder with a direct link. Tuesday mornings, you get a more stern reminder. And then Tuesday at 3 p.m., you get a final warning. It's stern, but it's written in our brand voice, so it's still kind of fun and quippy. This dramatically improved our compliance. It dips naturally around holidays and winter breaks and those sorts of things, but it normalizes pretty quickly. For PTO, we have a Fusion integration with our PTO management system called Purely HR. Every hour it syncs approved PTO request into Workfront. And if someone's PTO is within the next 10 business days, it posts the notification in our Slack traffic channel. There on the right-hand side, you can see what that notification looks like. So the whole team knows when someone's about to be out, in the near future or at the last minute. And then we also post weekly alerts for people who have more than 2 outstanding timesheets. This goes to our people leaders channel, so managers can follow up directly. None of this is really complicated Fusion stuff. It's just eliminating a lot of the manual reminders and making information visible where the people are. Another thing that's been huge for us is making resource data visible to the teams themselves. What you're seeing here is one of our hot sheet dashboards. I couldn't make it too much bigger. Each creative studio has one of these. It shows their workload balancer filtered just to them. It shows a calendar view with key project milestones, and it shows a 2-week task list so they can see what's coming. We use a custom task type field to identify a task, say a photo shoot or a workshop or a client presentation or travel. That allows us to filter and visualize different kinds of work. This also helps the team quickly understand not just how much work is coming, but what kind. We've also shared the Workload Balancer as an external link on a dashboard and pinned it to the top of everyone's layout template. On the right-hand side, you can see the Workload Balancer filter settings that we used. People are accustomed to seeing their workloadology, and they do raise their hand when something looks off. This transparency has been really valuable. People trust the system more when they can see it themselves. And then remember that wall I showed you at the beginning? Now it's digital in real time, thankfully. What you're seeing here is one of our studio calendars with PTO overlay, travel overlay, individual project milestones. Teams can see quickly. We have 3 client presentations next week. Sarah's on PTO. Jamie's traveling on a photo shoot. The custom task taxonomy makes that possible, being able to filter and color code by type of work. Another thing that we're doing is experimenting with AI for some resource insights. We've recently connected Claude to a read-only API of our Workfront instance. I like to just run queries daily to generate burn rate, digest, and capacity insights. On the right side there is what a daily digest looks like. It shows project burn rates, trend analysis, risk flags, and even PTO conflicts. Very experimental. We're kind of exploring what's possible when you can ask a natural language questions of your Workfront data and get back useful analysis. The goal eventually is to turn this data into proactive insights without someone having to manually generate reports every time leadership asks a question. Still early days, but it's exciting to think about what's possible. And then let's be honest, what's still frustrating? So I don't want to make you think that Workfront solves everything. But first, there's no native scenario planning for resources. At least I haven't figured that out yet. So when we're trying to figure out what it would take, if we could take on new work or how to handle a tight deadline, I can't model different approaches in Workfront. I can't say, what happens if we assign Sarah instead of Jamie? Or what if we shift this deliverable out by 3 days and not actually make changes in the system, but just kind of preview that? So we'll have to make those changes in Workfront. We reassign the people, move the task around, and then see what breaks. We do a lot of that sometimes. We're just put it in, let's see what breaks. Look at who turns red, figure out the conflicts, and then decide what's the right approach. I would love a draft mode where I could play with resource scenarios without touching the real data. Second, we don't trust the historical plan data. Workfront can alter those historical planned hours based on the way it rebalances when tasks, assignments, or planned hours are adjusted. So if we move someone's work from, say, a Monday to Wednesday in week 2, or if we reassign a task from one person to another, those changes can ripple backwards and change what the historical data shows. So we lose that original plan. That's why we have to do those exports on Friday to take some snapshots of those planned hours. So we're essentially creating our own historical record outside of Workfront because we can't rely on what's in the system to stay stable. Not elegant, but it works. Third, how planned hours spread out. When you assign someone a task with, say, 14 hours over 3 days, Workfront spreads that out evenly. But then you look at it, and you make adjustments, you end up with allocations sometimes like 4.67 hours per day, lots of weird decimal hours. For high-level planning, that's fine. But when you're actually trying to communicate to someone what their week looks like, 4.67 hours isn't really meaningful, and it just slows us down. So I wish we could just round things, by default or something in the system. And then fourth, the workload balancer settings. We can't really save default settings per user, per team, like in a layout template. So every time someone opens the workload balance, they have to configure their settings and their filters and their preferences and that kind of stuff. Sometimes when Workfront does an update or your browser refreshes, sometimes those settings kind of disappear and you have to catch it and make sure that you're have the right things set. So we have that. But there are pain points, but that doesn't stop us from making good decisions. It gives us a lot of visibility to have the right conversations. Again, we can see who's overloaded, we can spot those conflicts, and we can plan proactively. Sure does beat printing those calendars and sticking them to cork boards, I'll tell you that. For those of you, I want to acknowledge that everything I've shared assumes that you have Workfront management configured. If you don't, you might be wondering, where do I even start? The good news is Adobe has created really solid documentation for this. So there's a resource management preparation blueprint. It's a project template that literally walks you through every setup step as a checklist. It even includes an auto report to verify your user data is correct. Pretty cool stuff. I'll put those links to 3 key resources here. There's a main getting started guide, a video with Workfront's resource management expert, and the blueprint itself. The configuration piece does take work up front to get it set up. You'll need accurate user schedules. You have to get the job roles configured correctly, think about resource pools. But if you invest the time, kind of like we did early on, everything else I've shown becomes possible. My advice with resource management, don't try to do everything at once. Like, start with the blueprint, focus on getting getting accurate user data in there, and then build from there. The rhythm we use today has evolved over 5 years, and we didn't have it perfect on day one. So you just start somewhere, learn, and iterate. And that's what I have to share with you today, in the real world view. So thank you.
Thank you, Ross. That was awesome. So I know there was a couple of questions that came in. So we'll just go ahead and start with those if both of you are ready.
Sure.
So I believe Kelly's question was answered on the deleting of task, but hold on, where is it? Lindsay asked a great question about zeros in the workload balancer. And basically, how do you, I see Lindsay's coming off mute. Go for it.
Yeah. That we found had a lot of experience where filtering the data in Planner still gives us a lot of junk data. We've had to get really creative with like the layers of filtering and then export and then filter it again and export it. And then you have to unify the data. But we also get a lot of junk zeros because we hit this like max out that Workfront has said. That's by design, but I'm curious how you're managing that excess.
From the Planner export?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do some weird combination of like summing a whole bunch of hours across the row, and if they equal 0, I filter out that entire row, just to get rid of projects that show up with zeros across the board. To pull that out. I haven't run into any like export limitations per se yet. Maybe because it's only the date ranges that we're using is 4 weeks and 4 months. But yeah, that's why we are pulling a lot of stuff out of export. It was just because there's so much noise in the Planner that it's really hard to, like, the deeper you dive, the more junk you see.
Yeah, that's been our experience. But thank you for affirming the solidarity.
We're in it together.
Yeah, looks like Kelly is also in it with you too as well. So maybe we can do an idea and Adobe can make an update.
There we go.
Victoria, this question is for you from Rohitash. So Rohitash, I don't know if you want to come off mute. There you are.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for the wonderful presentation. I had a question regarding Fusion. So essentially, when we are creating Fusion scenarios, question is, how do you create a backup of the system prior to making changes to it by running your scenarios? Because in certain circumstances, if the scenarios fail and we end up, making huge changes to the system, we would need to revert the system back to where it was originally. And so how do you take that snapshot of the entire system and what's the switch to kind of flip it back? In IT, I know we have tools. With Fusion, how do you guys do it? How do you guys manage that thing? And on the same note, another question would be, say, 2 years from now, if we want to come back and see all the progression of these system changes from where we started to where we are at with all the versions, how do you track it? So it's associated with the same stuff, creating a backup. How do you do that?
I don't think we have great news for you on that one, Rohitesh, but I'm going to actually throw it over to Brendan Humphreys, who's my go-to Fusion resource, who could provide a better answer than I can.
Hey there, Rohitesh. I am on Victoria's team at Accenture, so I work with her directly on a day-to-day basis. We don't create a backup of our Workfront instance before we run our Fusion scenarios. What we do instead is we test all of our Fusion scenarios extremely extensively before deploying them to production. And the way we do this is by having a mirror of our Workfront production environment in our Sandbox 2 environment. And we have Sandbox 2 versions of our Fusion scenarios where we do development there. We run all of our tests, deploy all of our scripts there first, make sure everything looks good. And once it all passes muster, we will then clone that Sandbox 2 version of a Fusion scenario and deploy it to production instead, so that we can avoid any unexpected errors from bad scripts.
Yeah, I mean, that's generally what we do, but the IT security and compliance team wants a backup plan should anything fail. And the plan that they're looking for is give everybody the same instance that they were on prior to the change. We can do a thorough testing, and that's what we are doing in our other Sandbox 1 environment and preview, which is kind of a replica on a weekly basis of our production instance. But the fact remains that if we don't have a way in production to revert back to where it was, if there is any hiccups, if there is any corner cases that were not tested, because there's never 100% testing, there's always 99.9, and there's that little thing that can remain, especially when we're looking at production with all these different complexities involved. So, yeah, go ahead.
And somebody else can feel free to chime in. I don't think Workfront has the capability. Very unfortunate, but definitely might be something to talk with Adobe. If you have a customer support, is that what it's called, Monique? I see you nodding.
Yeah.
They might be able to provide a roadmap of where that might be headed.
Okay.
I think in addition to that, like obviously Idea Exchange, I will always recommend that. But I think also in the meantime, because you can now export scenarios and like import them, and it's helpful for folks like Victoria and Brendan when they're trying to deploy this in multiple instances. Maybe export the one that is working properly and just save it as like a copy on your SharePoint, your computer, wherever you kind of save those things in your company. And at least that way, if you needed to redeploy, you have it and you can just import it back in without having a bunch. Me and my Fusion expert, Doug, he has basically, I think 4 or 5 different folder structures within our Fusion team, where one is like the lab, and that's where we're tinkering. Then we have one that's like for production, and that's where we move it when we know like, yep, this is good. So anytime we need to do more tinkering, we'll take a copy of it and put it in in progress, work in progress. I don't remember the names of them all, but we'll put it there and tinker on it while the good one is still in production and on. And then you can kind of move that into like your archive, move your new one up, and that way you have like multiples. Go ahead, Ross.
I was just going to add on to what they're saying. There are some third-party like gold level providers for Adobe Workfront. One that comes to mind that, based on our conversation, is called WorkFocus. They have a whole system that ties into GitHub. So GitHub can track all of the changes to all of your Fusion scenarios, and also has a ton of developer tools that are available that give you a lot of different and unique performance and analytical information about the scenarios and troubleshooting and tracking and debugging and all of that kind of stuff. But it does give you that ability to connect it to GitHub as well. something you might want to look into.
Yeah. The primary concern was if scenarios are complex and they're running and cause several changes to nth atomic level within production environment, then to revert back all the changes. If it's a simple change, perfect. We can fix those. It's easy to use these screenshots that we have obtained through third-party tools or through the process that we have in place to capture those screenshots to go back either manually or create another scenario that reverses those changes. But if the scenarios are really complex, that kind of go really deep into Workfront, different layers within Workfront, and makes changes to the nth layer, which is like maybe 20 layers down. And now we're not in a position to go back, and even by creating the reversal of the scenarios, another scenario that will spin things up and make those changes again. And it also logs into the log file of all these changes that have been happening. So it's like dirty in some ways.
Yeah.
But if there was a cleaner way, it would have been great. I mean, that's a real improvement then.
Yeah. If you haven't talked to Sam Taylor yet, I advise you to find his email and hit him up, because he's kind of all things Fusion from the Adobe like product side, and can probably, at least your ideas wouldn't fall on deaf ears. So not saying that we're, not listening to you, but he's someone that can actually make those changes in software. But I completely agree with everything you're saying.
If someone can drop me his email,
Yeah, I'll dig it up. I can't promise that I still have it, but I know the Scale team just did an event with him last week or the week before, and I think he put it in that deck, which very layered, but we'll have ways to find it, or just reach out to the Scale team and they'll be able to send it to you, because they definitely have it. Just looking at time, I know we are at time. I could keep talking about all of this forever, but we all have our day jobs. So just really quickly, if you have not joined the DMV or the Boston or the Ohio or the Champions office hours, we represent all of those WUGs. So be sure to join those. You do not have to live in that location to attend, just like most of you were from all over the place. If you are interested in being a WUG leader, myself and Boston are looking for co-leads. So reach out to Julie Wilson and let her know that you want to help us out. We will greatly appreciate that. And there are plenty of events that are coming. We're going to have another DMV WUG event at the end of this month, which is very much just a community problem solving jam. So if you have a question, just ask it. We're going to throw spaghetti at the wall. We're going to try to get them solved. No promises there. And then also you'll have the links to all of these on the event. It might already be there, but if not, join the office hours, join the content supply chain, attend the Scale events, go to Summit if you can. There's also some AI community chats that's happening, and more learning available. So I know I went through those super, super quickly, but this is recorded, so you'll have it. But thank you all for joining our co-WUG event, and I look forward to future ones. And if you want to come at the end of the month, join.
Thanks, everybody. Great to see y'all. Take care. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.